Going on? We are live now from Winthrop, Minnesota. And if you are joining me, thank you very much. Um, we are doing a live reading of my latest book, Pavor Nocturnus. And yeah, kind of looking forward to the release of this. This is going to be my largest book I've written. I mean, other than the poem book that I wrote. But yeah, it's it's like 470 something pages. So hopefully we can get through this within the next 6 days. I'm just gonna do the first chapter tonight, and then every night until Halloween, I will be doing. I'll be reading about two chapters a night. Gonna wrap it up Halloween night with the last chapter, which is the longest story in the whole entire book. Kind of ties everything together. So, if you are joining me, and I appreciate if you are, or if you're joining me later on after this is done, yeah, give me a shout. Yeah. So got a little Lemmy in the background singing "Sympathy for the Devil." Tonight's chapter 1 is entitled "The Devil's Got Me." So, without further ado, let's all grab our coffee or whatever you're drinking. I need coffee because I have a day job that gets me up early. Anyway, we are going to roll into Pavor Nocturnus, a new anthology of horror by me, Bradley Boddicker. Forward. Well, here we are, my friends, ready to read something pulled from the nightmares of my head. As with the last horror anthology, I wanted to do something different. That becomes an issue, doesn't it? How do you tell a story differently? I've always had a formula when writing horror stories. I usually would take a nightmare I had, write it down in a notebook, then I'd start adding details, and pretty soon I've got me a story. Then I had a good friend tell me about a nightmare she had, and then said I should make up a horror story from it. I asked if I could write stories from other people's nightmares. So I sent out a request to friends and family on my website to send me snippets of their nightmares, and I would use them as prompts for a nice little horror story. I got permission to use their names or change them at their request. And here you have Night Terrors, or Pavor Nocturnus if you happen to speak the Old Latin as a second language. So let me give a wholehearted thank you to those of you who gave me their nightmares, and let me toy around with them to create the following. Thank you to Felix, Pam, Stephanie, Lori, Linda, Dean, Pimo, Alex, and Lynette. Your feedback, your readership, your friendship is very much appreciated. Author's note, please read these stories in order. The final story ties them all together. So what do you say? Ready to go to bed? I checked the closets and under the bed, and they're filled with horrors beyond anything you can imagine. And that's not saying much, considering you're the one that came up with some of this. Cuddle up now, put that glass of water next to your bed, say your prayers and sleep. Dream about the what ifs. Let your mind take over and enjoy the ride. Good night, my friends, and don't let the bed bugs bite. Bradley L. Boddicker, October 2023. Chapter 1, The Devil's Got Me. This one's mine. I used to have a recurring nightmare about my mother being possessed and killing my father and me. The voices in the closet were a real thing. Deep beneath the Paw Patrol comforter, the shape of a little boy shivered. While the temperature of his bedroom was indeed 10 degrees colder than the rest of the Silva's apartment, so cold that one may be able to see their breaths slightly, Brandon was shivering in the sheer terror. Deep inside his closet, beyond the door that was slid slightly to the right, there was something in the darkness. It had whispered his name, slowly and gravelly, like a hiss that was as cold as the icicles hanging outside his windows, like jagged fangs. Outside his room, the door shut tight, his parents, Gina and Cameron, were having a full-fledged fight. Their voices were loud and hateful. Brandon winced at every swear word that left his parents' mouths. Despite the eruption of screaming out in the living room, the whisperer in the closet was louder, almost as if he were speaking in his head. "Brandon," it said over and over. Brandon only muttered to himself in his squeaky little 4-year-old voice, uttering a plea for his mother or father to intercede in his haunting. "Stop it," he spoke. The whispering stopped. He lay there quietly beneath his blanket, waiting to hear it. But it never came. He pulled the covers down slowly, feeling the chilly air hit his tear-stained face. "Mom," he uttered. "Daddy?" But they were busy screaming obscenities at each other. Suddenly, the sound of breaking glass came from the other side of his door. His dad screamed his disapproval of the hurled glass, and his mother laughed and told his father that he had already used up her last fuck. "Mom," he said, this time much clearer and a little louder. "Dad!" His dad suggested to his mother that maybe they should just bust all the glass they have in the house, and his mother concurred and began chucking more drinkware at his head. "Mommy!" he screamed. "Daddy!" His closet door slid all the way open. The blackness from inside seemed to gush into the bedroom, and the temperature fell even more. "Brandon!" it howled in a louder whisper. Brandon screamed at the top of his lungs and dived under his covers, hoping Ryder and his Paw Patrol would protect him. "The devil's got me!" he screamed over and over. He felt a tug at the end of his bed cover. He screamed even louder till his voice was hoarse. He was sure that whatever dwelled in that closet had a hold of him. He gripped the end of his blanket with his little hands until the bright light of his bedroom light temporarily blinded him. Still claiming the devil surely had him, his father lifted him up, and Brandon slapped and clawed until he realized that his dad was holding him. "Daddy," he sobbed. "What's going on, little man?" his dad asked, concerned. The devil. He's in the closet." "In the closet? Kiddo, do you have your window open? It's cold as hell in here." "He kept saying my name, Daddy. And then he opened my closet. He opened it and he was going to get me." Cameron drew his son's curtains back, and the windows were closed tight. He looked over at the closet, and the left panel door was pulled all the way to the right. The inside of the closet did look a little darker than it should, but he shook it off and attended to his son. "Brandon," he said, "there's no such thing as the devil." "But," Brandon protested, "I mean it. That's just a spooky story that they tell at church to scare you into being a good boy. Now just breathe." Brandon gulped in a few breaths and laid his wet face on his dad's shoulder. "Why is it so cold in here?" Gina asked. "Goddamn baseboard heat. I'll call the soup in the morning about it." Cameron brought Brandon into the bathroom across the hall and began to press a cold, wet washcloth over his son's eyes. Gina looked on, concerned. "You won't let him get me?" Brandon asked. "Will you, Daddy?" His dad gently shushed him. "I won't let anybody get you, buddy. Now just breathe, okay? It's gonna be okay." Cameron turned to look at his wife. "I'm sorry." Gina gave him a quick glare and then slowly said back, "Me too." "Look, why don't I put him to bed with you tonight? I'll clean up the living room and sleep on the couch." You sure? I mean, granted, that's where I was going to end up anyways tonight, right? Gina smiled and nodded in agreement. Cameron and Gina Silva were nearly full-blooded Italian, Sicilian to be exact, and their arguments tended to be a little more passionate than most couples. Their arguments regarded money, careers, daily stressors, and more every other day. Cameron was a war vet, and when he finished his service with the Army, the couple decided to travel to the United States. They had left Georgia and traveled into Texas. After a few months, they ended up in Fontana, California. The heat of the desert was too much, and they went north to Gig Harbor, Washington. 8 months into the Pacific Northwest's rainy season, they decided to go to Minnesota. They did try New York and also Florida, but they had fallen in love with the Four Seasons of Minnesota, so they moved back and landed in Valley Lake, a suburb of St. Cloud. Cameron kissed his son goodnight and then a small peck to his wife and went out into the living room and began to pick up the broken glass. Brandon curled into a ball, cuddled up next to his mom, and drifted immediately into sleep. Gina sat up for an hour longer to read a book. Brandon opened his eyes, and for a moment he was disoriented. It wasn't his room, and after looking around he recognized it as his parents'. He could also smell the scent of his mom, and he looked over, and she was sitting up in bed facing the wall. He reached out his little hand and touched his mom's back. He couldn't tell what time it was because his parents had blackout curtains on the windows. "Mom?" he said in his tired little voice. She didn't answer, and it didn't really react to his touch either. "Mom?" There was a cracking noise as if his mother were cracking her knuckles, and then something happened that he wasn't really sure what it was. The skin on her back rippled like a tide coming in fast forward. "Mom?" Her head spun around and her eyes were completely black as if they were filled with her pupils. Her jaw stretched to an impossible length and a few croaks came out of her, and then a shrill shriek began to build in her chest. "Mommy?" She hopped up onto the bed on all fours, snarling as the scream began to spill from her mouth. Her hands were clenched into claws that ended in long white nails that curled into a sharp edge. "Daddy!" he shouted as he backed away from his mother. Her screech hurt his ears, and he ran down the hallway to the living room, where his father was asleep. But he wasn't asleep. He was sitting rocking in his big yellow chair. "Dad, help! It's Mom!" he pleaded with his dad. His mother came screaming out of the bedroom, and then she began flailing her arms at his father. Blood flew on ropes from his dad's face and painted the wall behind him. "Dad, no!" He watched his dad's body convulse as blood spurted out of opened arteries, and his mother kept screeching and tearing at his face. She began to slow her attack and then stopped altogether and then looked up at her son. There was no more screams, just a low guttural growl that made its way out of her gaping mouth. Brandon tried to scream, but nothing came out. Maybe it was just too high-pitched to hear, but he could feel it scraping at the back of his throat. But no sound came out, not even a squeak. His mother stepped off his dad and began to make her way towards her son, claws dripping with his dad's flesh, hair, and blood. "Oh, God, Daddy!" he sobbed. "Oh, God, Daddy, no!" His mother only moved at a snail's pace as she closed in on him. "Please, Mommy, don't!" As she approached her son, a long but thin grin stretched across her face, and she brought her claw back slowly because she was savoring his fear. He thought he was wetting his big bird footy pajamas. Before that clawed hand could strike, he opened his eyes, and he was awake. His mother lay next to him. She was smoking a Winston and reading a book. The cigarette smoke stung his nose, and his mother turned to look at him. "Good morning, my son," she smiled. "How'd you sleep?" But he didn't hear her. He had run out of bed and to his father, crying. Gina came out of the bedroom and found her son curled up tight against Cameron, sobbing into his shoulder. "What the fuck, Gina?" he said to his wife. "What?" she said, flabbergasted. "He woke up and looked like he had the worst nightmare and ran off to you." Don't let her get us, Daddy! Please! He pleaded. Calm down, buddy, Cameron said soothingly. You must have had a nightmare. No, Daddy. Mommy tried to kill me. And she killed you. Shh. She didn't kill me. I'm right here, aren't I? Brandon stopped, sobbing for a moment, and looked at his dad. Yes? So it had to be a nightmare because I'm right here. And Mommy isn't killing anyone, is she? He looked over at his mom, wiping his tear-stained eyes. No. Okay, his dad said, standing up, holding him. His grip was tight. Let's get you washed up and get some breakfast in you, okay? Okay. He pissed the bed, too, Gina said. Maybe you need to stop watching those damn horror movies around him, Cameron said with some contempt. Oh, right. It's my fault, isn't it? Well, where else is he picking this shit up at? Fuck you, Cameron. He knows they're just movies. Cameron ignored her and washed his son's face with a warm washcloth. Brandon winced at his mother's cursing and covered his ears. The arguing needs to stop, Cameron said quietly to his wife. He wrapped his arms around his son and held him. Gina took a deep breath, joined her husband, and hugged them both. The next evening, Brandon was in his room playing with his Star Wars action figures. Gina was cleaning up the supper dishes, and Cameron was working late. The family cat, a calico feline by the name of Pebbles, crept into Brandon's room and wandered around his imaginary Hoth landscape as he manipulated Luke Skywalker through the air in his snowspeeder across the oncoming AT-AT walkers. Diving towards Pebbles, Brandon released a proton torpedo at her, and she let out a meow and ran under the bed. Brandon chuckled to himself and continued his barrage of the looming danger of the tyrannical empire. Brandon, came the whisper from the closet. He froze and looked into the darkness. Brandon. The room began to chill, and he could see his breath come out in short, rapid plumes. Mom? He said, eyes wide. Come here, Brandon. Mom! Pebbles came out from under his bed, her back hair standing straight up, and her ears pulled back sharply. She hissed at the closet, howling. Mommy! The cat pounced into the closet and disappeared into the blackness, screeching and growling. Brandon dropped his snowspeeder and backed away onto his bed. Mom! Pebbles walked out of the darkness, staring straight at Brandon, hissing and growling at him. Slowly, she walked towards him. Pebbles? He whimpered. Pebbles, are you okay, kitty? She answered with a hiss. Her green eyes with slit pupils stared angrily at him. Another hiss, and she pounced at the foot of his bed. Pebbles! She leaped at his face, fangs exposed and claws extended, and tore into the soft flesh of his screaming face. Gina ran into the room, feeling the cold hit her immediately, and then saw her son getting his face ripped apart by their cat. She grabbed Pebbles by the scruff of her neck and threw her. The cat flew into the closet and disappeared, while Gina grabbed her son and ran into the bathroom. She clicked on the bathroom light, and Brandon's face was completely covered in blood. He screamed and began to sob uncontrollably. She tried to calm him, but he kept screaming. She ran a cloth through the warm water and began to gently pat his face. The cloth turned from white to red immediately. Brandon's sobs began to weaken as his face became clearer and clearer. When the blood was gone, she looked at his face, puzzled. There were no marks, no cuts or scratches, or even bite marks. What happened in there, Brandon? She asked. He didn't want to answer. He just shrugged his shoulders. Were you teasing Pebbles? Is that why she attacked you? He shook his head. No. Are you sure? He nodded. Yes. Well, she usually doesn't attack people like that unless she's provoked. It was... He hesitated. Yes? It was the devil. Gina sighed. Please don't start this again, Brando. It was, Mama. The devil tried to get me, but he got pebbles instead, and then... That's enough, Brandon. I'm not lying, Mom. Stop with all this devil shit. Do you hear me? Brandon bowed his head. Come on. It's time for bed. Let's brush your teeth. I don't want to go in my bedroom, Mommy. How about if I lay down with you? He thought about it a while. He scrubbed his upper molars with his electric toothbrush. He spat into the sink and agreed that this would suffice. Brandon was sitting in the shopping cart while Gina was grabbing some tomatoes from the produce aisle. He was excited to see a box of Captain Crunch in the basket and began to crave it when they would arrive home. Gina returned to the cart and began maneuvering it towards the cooler section. Brandon shivered when the chilly air hit him. You cold, Brando? She asked him. Brandon nodded. Let me go see if I can get a blanket from one of the workers, okay? He nodded again, and his mom walked through the 2 swinging doors. He kicked his feet and hummed to himself. From somewhere in the back, a loud screech echoed into the rest of the store. Brandon and the other shoppers stopped and stared towards the swinging doors. There was a man hollering in the back, and then more screeching. Uh-oh, Brandon said to himself. He began to struggle getting out of his seat. The screeching got louder, and suddenly a grocery store worker came stumbling out of the swinging doors. His face, shirt, and apron were covered with blood. Oh, my God! He shouted. Run! His mother ran through the double doors and leaped onto the man, tearing into his throat. People began to run. Brandon started to struggle again to stand up in the cart and run, but he couldn't. He tried to scream himself, but nothing would come out. More people fell to his mother's attacks, her hair in disarray and eyes black like shiny marbles. She looked up from her latest victim and stared straight into the eyes of her son and screeched again. Mama, no! He cried out. Gina got up and began lumbering towards him. She brought her hand back to deliver a fatal blow, and Brandon woke up screaming. This time, he was alone in bed. The sun was shining through the window, and a rectangular beam of sunlight poured out over the blue shag carpet of his room. Cameron opened his bedroom door. Brando, he said softly, you okay? Daddy? Brandon whimpered. Yeah, champ, it's me. Cameron sat on the bed beside his son. He wrapped an arm around his boy and kissed his head. Brandon began. I had a nightmare, I think. Another one? His dad said, concerned. Getting to be a habit. A bad habit, Daddy. Well, let's get some cereal and try to forget about it, okay? Okay, Dad. Brandon got out of his bed. I did a pee-pee again, Daddy. I'm sorry. Cameron stripped off the sheets, rolled them up, and carried them to the hamper. Gina met him in the hallway. Nightmares again? She asked. Yep, Cameron nodded. He wet the bed again, too. What the fuck is happening to him? I don't know, but his room does seem colder than the rest of the apartment. I checked the registers and they're working, just not hard enough. Funny thing last night, she began. Pebbles attacked him. What? The cat? She's a fat, lazy thing. How the hell can she... Listen, I ripped her off Brandon last night. His face was covered with blood. I took him into the bathroom and washed all the blood off him, and there wasn't even a wound on him. Come on, Gina, what are you saying? I'm saying the cat attacked him, and there wasn't a mark on him. What do you think? I'm lying about it? Ask him. All right, don't get upset. I mean, surely there's an explanation for all of this. There must be... Where's the cat now? Gone. What do you mean, gone? This is a 2-bedroom apartment. How can she be gone? You look for her, then. I've been all over this place looking for that fucking cat. If I found her, I was going to take her to the vet and have her put down. Jesus, don't you think that's a little harsh? Harsh? She attacked our son. Isn't that a little harsh, Cameron? Okay, sorry. What do you think we should do? Take him to a shrink or something? I thought we could talk to Pastor Moore after we dropped him off at preschool. Pastor Moore? Do we need the head of the church to think we've gone insane? I mean, come on, Gina. Just listen to me. Maybe he can recommend either a child psychologist or someone that can help him with those nightmares. That's all I'm saying. We Angels was a preschool ran by the Church of St. Andrew. It was dead center of St. Cloud neighborhoods that housed the Africans, Italians, Polish, and the Irish. The congregation was a melting pot of diversity. The Silvas dropped Brandon off at his class and walked up the steps to the rectory and knocked on the door of Pastor Moore. Pastor Frederick Moore was in his 60s, looking forward to retirement in the next few years and hoping to park himself in a condo in Fort Myers, Florida, to forget about the Minnesota winters. The cold had done a number on his arthritis, which had reached his lower back and his knees. "Well," he greeted, "Cameron and Gina. What a sight for sore eyes. Please, come in." "Sorry to bother you, Pastor," Gina said. "We know how busy you are." "Nonsense. I just perked a pot of coffee if you're both interested." "Please," Cameron said, sitting at his humble 4-foot by 4-foot dining room table. After the coffee was poured and the sugar and cream offered, the pastor sat down and looked at them, both trying to read them. They both looked concerned. Gina looking a bit guilty, as mothers always seem to look, but frantically concerned. And Cameron looked concerned, but not the same way she was. "Now," he started, "what can I do for the both of you?"
"It's our son, Brandon," Gina said.
"Ah, yes. How is the young man doing?"
"Not good," Cameron spoke up. "He's having nightmares. Maybe that's not even a good term for it. Maybe night terrors is a better word."
"How long has this been going on?" the pastor asked.
"Probably for a week."
"That's not all that's been happening," Gina spoke up this time. "There's other things. His room is freezing. So freezing cold you can almost see your breath in it. He wets the bed constantly. The cat attacked him. He keeps screaming the devil's got me almost every night."
Cameron laughed nervously.
You said the cat attacked him?" the pastor asked.
"Yes," Gina says. "I pulled the cat away from him and his entire face was covered with blood. I swear to you it was. When I washed all the blood off him, there wasn't a scar on him."
"Have either of you mentioned anything about the devil to him in conversation?"
They both shake their heads in the negative.
"Then, where do you think he got the notion that the devil is coming to get him?"
Cameron looked accusingly at his wife. Gina rolls her eyes.
"Did I say something?" the pastor begins.
"Horror movies," Gina says with a guilty look on her face. "Every Saturday night, Brandon and I pop some Jiffy popcorn and we sit and watch old horror movies. But nothing bloody or gory, and none of those satanic films. Just the old Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney black and whites. They're harmless."
"I've watched them," Pastor Moore says. "I agree. They are harmless compared to today's scary movies."
Pastor Moore finishes his coffee and gets up to grab another cup and offers to top off the cups of the scared parents before him.
"Let me ask you both something a little personal."
They both nod.
"How have things been around at the house?"
They both look guilty. Cameron takes a gulp of his coffee and Gina's leg begins to nervously twitch. "We've been arguing quite a bit lately," Cameron says. "There's talk about layoffs at work and I've been a little on edge. With Gina only working part-time, it's got both of us white-knuckling it through the day-to-day."
"Do the arguments get pretty bad?"
"Yeah, sometimes they do."
"Do you, know anything about pack animals?"
They both shake their heads.
"Wolves, tigers, and similar pack animals go on hunts, and they look for the weakest animal. Now, they may be an elderly prey or they may be an incredibly young prey, and when the rest of the prey is scattered about trying to save themselves, well, the weaker prey gets taken.
Well, what's this got to do with Brandon? Cameron asks.
Demons, or the devil, if you will, hunt for their prey in the same manner. When a child is left to fend on his own because his parents are, well, busy fighting each other and don't pay attention to the things that are circling their child, well, let's just say the child becomes fodder for the satanic.
You can't honestly believe, Cameron started.
I'm not saying that I believe your son is being scouted by Satan. I'm saying that this is how he and his minions work. I don't know. I don't know if I can swallow all this. I know it sounds far-fetched, and again, I'm only telling you that this is how the devil works. Could it be something else? Well, of course it could. And you should get a professional opinion from a licensed practitioner in child psychology. Could your heat registers be working incorrectly and cause Brandon's room to be chillier than the rest of the apartment? Well, yes, especially if you keep Brandon's door closed to keep out the arguing between the two of you. But cold enough to see your breath? Could your cat, whom I believe to be declawed, rip and tear at your son's face and then not leave a mark? Well, sure, they may have only been surface abrasions, and head wounds, no matter how shallow or light, seem to bleed more than any other wounds on the body. So, sure, perhaps a light scratch or fang into the top of Brandon's head, ever so slightly, caused all that bleeding, and then along with your cat went away without a trace.
I get your point, Cameron interrupts. The pastor's sarcasm was getting to him.
Look, Pastor Moore got serious. I understand nobody believes in all of this supernatural nonsense anymore. Not even the church, really. The church entertains the idea of angels, demons, and spirits only when it suits the narrative, but when it comes to backing up the idea that there truly is negative and positive forces out there, well, that can directly influence us physically, well, they refuse it. Even the good book says it, but you will not get a higher up in the church to back it up.
You talk like you've dealt with this a lot, Pastor, Gina spoke up.
Everything gets explained away with science now, psychology, everything gets treated with therapy and pills, but I have seen enough evidence to know otherwise.
So, Cameron asked, well, what do we do?
Well, why don't I come by tonight and talk with him? I'll check out his room and perhaps we can get to the bottom of all this.
Gina looks at Cameron and they both shrug their shoulders.
I don't see the harm in it. I promise not to influence him. We'll just call this a friendly visit from Pastor Moore.
Okay, Gina says. If you think it could help.
I'll swing by tonight after dinner.
Actually, why don't you come for dinner? I'll make a nice meal and it'll seem like a regular visit.
Sounds good. Brandon, Cameron says, why don't you get the door?
Brandon was always excited to have guests at the apartment, and he really liked Pastor Moore.
Master Brandon,
Pastor Moore greeted with the young boy.
Such a sight for sore eyes. You certainly are in your growth spurt.
Cameron took his coat, and Gina led him into the living room. After iced tea was offered and trail mix, small talk began amongst the adults. Brandon had gone into his bedroom to play with his action figures again. After an hour, Pastor Moore made his way into Brandon's bedroom. There was an intense battle waging between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker.
Hello, Pastor Moore,
Brandon said. No smile, just an emotionless expression on his face.
Playing Star Wars, are we, Brandon?
Pastor Moore asked.
Yeah, He did feel a slight chill in the air as soon as he was in Brandon's room. He wished he had kept his coat. He looked about the room to try to get a feel for things.
"You're here about the nightmares, aren't you?"
Brandon asked. This shocked him a bit. "Well, yes, Brandon. Your parents told me you've been having a lot of them."
"Did they tell you that the devil lives in my closet?"
Pastor Moore looked up slowly from Brandon to the closet. The sliding door sat slightly ajar. "They did mention that. Is he in here now?" Brandon perked his head up like he was listening for something. Then he shook his head and looked towards the pastor.
"I don't think so," he said. "He usually calls my name first."
Pastor Moore felt the temperature drop slightly and could have sworn he could see his breath. "Well, what does he sound like?"
"I'm not sure. He whispers my name."
"Do you believe in God, Brandon?"
I guess I sort of have to. If the devil is real, then God must be real."
"Well, that's quite a logical deduction."
"Then how come God doesn't whisper my name? Or come and help me?"
"Well, maybe he sent me." Brandon looked at the pastor up and down and then returned to his action figures.
"I guess so."
"Brandon, why don't you tell me about your nightmares?" Brandon looks up and stares at the closet door. He focuses on it and looks back down.
"I don't really want to talk about them."
"Are you scared?"
"Kind of."
"What are you scared of?" "Nightmares are a part of your imagination. They aren't real."
"I think my mom is a demon."
Pastor Moore didn't expect that answer so quickly. "Well, what makes you say that?"
I dream about it. She does these horrible things with her nails."
"But your mother wouldn't hurt you. You know that." Brandon looked up into the pastor's eyes. It was the sad look of someone that hasn't been to sleep in an awfully long time. He looked defeated. It broke the old pastor's heart.
"My mother wouldn't hurt me, but the devil would."
"Brandon," the pastor got up, "I wonder if you would allow me to demonstrate something."
"What?"
Brandon looked curiously at the old man. "I wonder if you might come sit on the bed here and allow me to open the closet door." Brandon looked terrified.
"No!" he shouted. "I haven't heard him all day. Please, Pastor Moore, I don't want to hear him anymore. I don't want you to open the closet door."
"It'll be all right, Brandon. I wear the armor of the Lord. The devil can't touch me. I will pray for our protection. Perhaps I can even send him back into hell forever, and he'll never bother you again." Brandon sat thoughtfully on that.
You really can do that?"
he asked. "Well, of course I can. I work for the man upstairs, after all." Brandon thought about it for a few minutes and then got up and sat on his bed, shivering not only from the odd chill in the air, which the pastor could also feel, but from sheer terror.
You won't let him get me?"
Brandon asked. "I won't let anything get you, Master Brandon," Pastor Moore assured.
"Oh, okay then."
Pastor Moore pulled out his crucifix and kissed it. He made the sign of the cross at the doors of the closet. "Father God," he began, "thank you for your armor which is given to me to fight against the enemy. I know that my war is not against flesh and blood, so therefore I stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around my waist. Thank you for your word. Your word is truth, and I pray that every decision that I make today will be based on your words. I put the breastplate of righteousness in place to protect my heart, for out of the heart the mouth speaks. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer, and with my feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, I take up the shield of faith, which I can extinguish
all the flaming arrows of the evil one. I believe your word, and I have faith in it. Taking the helmet of salvation to protect my mind, my thoughts, my dreams, my vision, and what I see. Thank you for saving me, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Give me the scriptures that I need to speak against the enemy when he comes to attack me. In Jesus' name, amen. He could see his breath. A touch of fear tickled the back of his neck as he walked towards the closet door. Brandon had his hands over his eyes, and he whimpered, waiting for some terrible thing to come clawing its way out of his toy box and rip the old pastor to shreds. But the closet stood bare. 2 cardboard boxes full of Star Wars toys sat on the floor of the closet. Clothes of every color hung on wire hangers above them. Nestled deep within the only shadows that rested in the closet, 2 eyes glowed a bright yellow at them. Pastor Moore almost cried out until he heard the distinct meow from within. It was their cat. She came running out and jumped up onto Brandon's bed, purring loudly. Brandon hugged his cat while Pastor Moore caught his breath and then turned around. "Everything all right, Brandon?" Pastor asked. "Yes," Brandon answered. "Thank you, Jesus." Pastor sat on the bed with Brandon, petting the calico cat as she purred and revealed her belly for scratches. "I don't think the devil will be bothering you anymore." "Thanks, Pastor Moore." Brandon looked extremely grateful. "What do you say we go enjoy some of your mom's food?" "Okay." Pastor Moore got up and opened Brandon's door. Beyond it was a depthless black. A frigid wind rushed into Brandon's room, and the light popped above. Pastor?" Brandon stuttered. "Hello?" Pastor Moore called out into the blackness. "Cameron? Gina? Close the door, Pastor! Gina! Please, Pastor, close the door! The devil is out there!" "Nonsense! We put on the armor of God. It's just a power out..." "Pastor?" There was no answer. Pastor Moore's back was turned to Brandon. It looked like he was holding on to his neck. Then Pastor Moore turned around. His throat had been slashed. He was trying to hold the blood in, but the arteries were pumping too hard, trying to coagulate the wound close. "Pastor?" Brandon asked again. Something grabbed Pastor Moore by the back of his sweater vest and pulled him into the deep shadows that permeated beyond Brandon's room. "Pastor!" Brandon repeated. "Brandon," came the whisper in the darkness. All right. That is chapter 1 of the book. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So we'll be doing 2 chapters tomorrow night at 9 o'clock Central Standard Time. And we'll be doing that every night and up to Halloween. If you haven't already, subscribe to this page, Hive Productions, or also please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I was going to go live on YouTube, but I have to have more than 5 subscribers, I think is what I got now. And that's fine. I'm not trying to be an influencer, but it does help my channel. It helps me get the word out there about my books and anything else I try to, crap out of my head. I appreciate you guys, all your support and reading. Thank you, Sheila. I hope you like the rest of the book. So this is kind of a freebie for you guys. I know some of you wanted me to do audiobooks of my books, and I am slowly going to get there. I need to soundproof some stuff because I have really loud neighbors. Actually, tonight before we went live, they must have set off the smoke alarms because they all went off throughout the whole house, and that was kind of a disaster, and I heard them
scrambling around to get that shut off. Yeah. So anyway, that's why I have Motorhead playing in the background as well, to help kind of deafen their partying upstairs. Anyhow, so yeah, it's the book is going to be. I'm going to try to make it available by October 31st. That's what my goal is. It should be on Kindle before then. But yeah, hopefully everything goes live October 31st, which is on a Tuesday. It'll be available on Amazon, and we'll try to get it available to a whole bunch of other outlets as well. Let's see, what else do I got going on? Yeah, I think that's it. So hopefully see you guys tomorrow night for Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Those chapters, one is called Armageddon and Syphilis, and the third chapter is called Saturday Morning Fever. So yeah, both of them were really great nightmare prompts, and I'm fairly proud of the stories I was able to pull out of those. So thanks for joining me. Thanks, you guys, for always supporting me and buying my books. And if you do buy any of my books, please, please, please review them on Amazon. The more you review them, the more circulation and those annoying ads of my book pop up at Amazon for suggestions for other people to read besides friends and family. So, at any rate, kia ora to my family overseas that are watching. Thanks for everything, and thank all of you guys. And I'm going to go set up the live broadcast for tomorrow night. And we shall see you folks tomorrow. Have a great night and have awesome nightmares. Peace. Oh, by the way, my YouTube channel is at Bradley Boddicker 70. If you want to subscribe to that, would appreciate it. Peace.